Hi, good morning, Chicago. I'm getting used to this on my head. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me at this event today. I'm so honored to have an opportunity to speak to you about this project that started in 2016 as an assignment, a photography assignment for a radio program. I know, very interesting. But what that did, that allowed me to, for the first time, travel to the southern states of the United States, which was my first time there. And it allowed me to be in conversation and in contact with the Green Book, which I had no information about before this journey. I had been asked to go on this trip several times, and I kept saying no to it. But then I made this journey from New York to San Francisco for a teaching position at Stanford, and somehow that journey from leaving my home base to a new home base allowed me that sort of need and that openness to then travel to the South. So sometimes those geographic locations actually open up possibilities for new types of work, for different ways of working, but I think just for me, an opportunity to open up my own mind. So I have a lot to cover, and I want to leave some time at the end so that we all can be in a dialogue together. So on that original journey in spring of 2016, we started in Tallahassee, Florida, drove to Montgomery, Alabama, then Jackson, Mississippi, then up to Memphis, Tennessee, and then we ended in a town called Ferguson, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis. As it was said before, the Green Book is a publication that starts in 1936 and ends in 1966, 67. It is a book that is published by the author, the publisher. His name is Victor Green, so that is his name. The Green Book is Victor Green, and he lived in Harlem. And it's published in Harlem. For most of the time of the publication, where the printing press were a secret, because they thought that they would be bombed, right? So you never knew where the publication space was. But he was based in Harlem. And the reason for the guide was for his own personal use at first, because he's living in New York, he has family in different parts of the country, in the South, in the Midwest, and he needs to travel to those spaces, and he's having a problem himself traveling the United States at that time, and he figures that other people also must have this problem, and therefore this guide is a need in the community. A lot of the early sort of locations in the guide come from postal workers, right, who are already in neighborhoods. They know where places are. They know the local routes. So the Green Book starts out as a northeast directory, slowly moves to the South and the Midwest, and then eventually ends up on the West Coast. What's beautiful about this guide also is it covers Canada, it covers several islands in the Caribbean, it also expands itself to Europe, and Victor is so optimistic and also of the time in the United States, he also thought eventually if we ended up in the moon, there would be a Green Book necessary. So what I've placed your town, Chicago, in the mix. This would be the Chicago, there's a little quarter page, the one before, but this is basically Chicago here. And all of the state of Illinois, basically. What I find on the road is sometimes these sites are still present and active. Sometimes they could be taken down, they could be replaced with other buildings. What's interesting to note in the guide is that there are no phone numbers. So you can imagine yourself as a traveler not being new to a certain part of the country, that you just have to drive there and hope that what's in the guide is correct. As you thumb through the guide, there's actually questions that Victor asks the audience, the readers, which is like, if you go to a place and it's not there, let us know, so that we can update it in the next guide. So it's a sort of crowdsourcing of the people traveling in the United States. As we also flip through the book, I just pulled a few ads from there. There would be service stations, of course. Gas is an important part to a road trip, and you couldn't get gas at all locations as a black motorist. Some were friendlier than others, and specifically, I think there'd be more problems around the restrooms, which would have been segregated in different parts of the country. This motel, you find lots of these hotels still around in the United States today. I'll show you some pictures I've taken in different parts of the country. There are lots of eating shops, too. And what I like about the eating shops is the economy around the Green Book, around the advertising for the Green Book, allows for the first time, maybe I won't say the first time, allows a lot of entrepreneurship within the black community. So people who have extra rooms start opening up their homes and renting out rooms in their house to motorists. We'll see a couple photographs later. There are also people who set up eat shops in their homes. They start small restaurants in their homes as well for the would-be travelers. The question is, will a traveler come, right? And there are some stories where no one ever came, right, to their home, but they were ready. And I like to think about this as a sort of early form of an Airbnb sort of culture that we are really familiar with today. And I believe this sandwich shop would be a pretty good example of that. So what does it look like being on the road, being a photographer, traveling around the South? So this is the crew. I am the third person of this crew. There's Alvin Hall, who's the presenter of the material. There's Jeremy Grange, who's the sound recorder and the executive producer, and then I'm the one that's not in the picture because the photographer is never in the picture. I'm never in the picture. And we're at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is in Selma. Thank you very much. There are these moments, there's so much in my mind of places, because I'm on the road all the time at this moment. And we walked that bridge to take that shot, which was pretty powerful. My first time walking that bridge. At other times, if we're not at a major monument, we're inside of people's kitchens. This is a moment when we are going through the book with this couple, and they are reminiscing about their travel and their parents' travel using the Green Book. And we were looking at local sites just outside of Jackson, Mississippi with them, and just recording the stories that arise from the re-remembering of places in the Green Book, but also the re-remembering of what it's like to be in a segregated United States, what it's like to be in that United States also today. At other moments, we're in parking lots. This happens to be the parking lot where people gathered after Michael Brown in Ferguson was killed. This was the first gathering place. And it was a parking lot. I think it had a donut shop. It had a Firestone tire repair shop. And here we met a woman by the name of Tiffany, that's not her real name. She's a local activist in Black Lives Matter. And she met with us to talk to us about what life was like in Ferguson and is like today. But I show this picture just to show how quiet, this is that parking lot right across from the police station, how quiet and intimate this travel with the Green Book is. So I get to come and make these talks and travel around the country and speak and show the work. But for the most part, it's a lonely time of just me on the road with one or two people, or by myself with my dog who travels with me. And we are meeting people one-on-one, sort of getting the lay of the land and the stories from each of the different regions that we're visiting. This is just a cell phone picture. So this is called Tuke's House, and Tuke's House is a home that the two owners, this is a plaque, James and Dorothy Tukes, and it's now on the registry, the National Registry, as an important place. And it's a pretty common home. It's now owned by their son, and the son rents out the house, different parts of the house, as a rooming house, until he can figure out how to make this house viable as an important Black landmark that it has been acknowledged to be, but now he has to figure out how to turn that, make that possible. So right now it's being rented out by people who live in the house. I want to tell you a story which hopefully explains a little bit more about the work you'll see after, and also how this project sort of grabbed me literally by the throat in Montgomery, Alabama. So this is a moment at the Equal Justice Initiative, which is located in Montgomery, Alabama. This is a conversation that we were having with Brian Stevenson, who's the head lawyer, lead, the protagonist of the Equal Justice Initiative. He is also responsible for the newly opened lynching museum in Montgomery, Alabama. And he's also written a book called Just Mercy. And Brian spends his life working with people who are wrongly incarcerated in Alabama. And he's a big figure nationally, but in Alabama, which is where he focuses, this is a room that he brought us into after an extensive interview. I believe this room is now part of the lynching, one of the museums there. But in this case, this was part of his law office, one of the many rooms within his law office. So to also say that his law office is also in a warehouse, which was a former housing for slaves. It's one of the first stops that they went into in Montgomery, Alabama. So at the edge of the road, it's called Commerce Avenue. It's a train station, and there would be ferries, and they would shuttle through trains, first ferries and then trains, the slaves. They would march them up Commerce Avenue, and then this building where his law practice is now would be the first stop of many that the slaves would make as they were being sold in Montgomery, which is also the capital. Later it becomes the capital of the Confederacy. So that building alone has a lot of energy. And within this building, there is this project called the Soil Project. And I have to tell you about this because it is probably the best work. It's not a work of art, but it is the best sort of collection of objects that I think have a really powerful impact. So what this impact is every jar is equal to a person that was lynched in Alabama. And what happens is local community members, family members, community members, they have a member in their family that was lynched or someone that was lynched. They get together, they do research, they go through the archives, they look at news accounts, and they get to the best of their ability a location of where their member was lynched. And then as a community, they go out to that site using GPS, and they dig the soil of that exact location of where their family member, relative, was lynched. And then they place them in these jars, and they bring them back to the Equal Justice Initiative. And just one last thing, on the left side, that map shows the concentration of lynchings just in the state of Alabama, and then the other map up above about the southern states is sort of the intensity of lynchings in the South. Specifically in the South. Lynchings occurred all over the United States, to be clear. Now we're going to look at some photographs that I've taken and collected today, showing you what I'm seeing on this road. So these are some images I've taken. This one is in Jackson, Mississippi. It's called Sumners House. And what you find there is, again, you find a sort of national marker to the left, the driveway of the jazz, and it was a jazz club. It was a bar, jazz club, rooming house. And then within that grass, you would find just the foundation. So what's typical that I find so far is in the South, a lot of the buildings, if they're not there, there's still a slight resemblance of the building. Like the buildings don't get torn down like they do in big cities. It just sort of hangs out there, and eventually it rots and sort of falls down, and then they'll remove it. It's an interesting feel to walk those spaces. This is the Benmore Hotel. This is in Montgomery, Alabama. And the Benmore Hotel, in its heyday, is a fantastic, opulent building, according to local residents. It is, at that time, the tallest building in Montgomery, Alabama. It is a place where all of the civil rights activists within Montgomery or traveling to Montgomery would have met to gather. On the first floor in the front would have been a cafe, the Majestic Cafe. On the side of the building, which we'll go into in a moment, is a barber shop, still owned by the original owner when the building opened. The next two floors would have been single occupancy rooms with bathrooms, shared bathrooms. And then on the top floor was a ballroom. And according to locals, it was the place where you dressed your best to attend functions, jazz functions, weddings, social gatherings. This is going inside of the barber shop. And what we have on the wall is basically a collection of one barber, and it's people whose hair he cut, it's his family, it's a collection of his interests, locally, nationally, internationally. So, you'll have Malcolm X paired with Obama posters, with Nelson Mandela, with Jojo around the block who just got his hair cut and it's an awesome fade or something, But then he also brought in sort of older reminders of the arc of the struggle of like the colored waiting rooms. And it's also the barber shop where Martin Luther King, when he's in Montgomery, is always getting his hair cut too. So you find these really interesting places. This is just like a detail of one close-up of the wall. And oh my God, I'm not going to do that, but he is a fabulous man unto himself. He had the opportunity to build his own home, which is a rare thing because he couldn't live where he wanted to, so he had to live in a black neighborhood, but he built himself an amazing home. And I'll say this, it was a home that had two kitchens, one downstairs and one upstairs, because his wife didn't always like to go downstairs. But that's a whole nother story. Other places, this is back in Jackson, Mississippi. This is an avenue called Farish Street. So some of the sites, the Crystal Palace, will have sort of reminders of what used to be there, who would have traveled there. But what you find on Farish Street is a bunch of awesome buildings that are empty and hollowed out and boarded up. The owners of this property now refuse to put upgrades into the buildings. And the only three businesses, I believe, on this street is a funeral home, a florist to the funeral home, and a beauty shop are the only viable businesses on this street. And what happens is the owners, this is a historically black neighborhood, the owners are not black, and there is this question of, do we let that neighborhood flourish or not? Do we let that neighborhood come back? And those are choices that people are making. I'm going to end the southern part of the trip with, I guess I will have to call it the most famous Green Book site, which is the Lorraine Motel, where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And for me on that trip, and that was not the end, Ferguson was the end, but in Memphis, was probably the moment, one of the two moments that I thought this project had to continue beyond the 2 weeks of the BBC commission. Because at that moment, I had known about, obviously, the Lorraine Motel. I've seen it in pictures, but I had never actually put this idea of safety, the national sort of conversation on safety together until I actually arrived there and walked to that museum site and stood there and realized, how ironic that the place that is listed in the book, it's actually one of the most famous places also in Memphis in the Green Book. A lot of people stayed there. It would have been the place to stay, right? But on that day, it was not for King. I'm going to take you for a moment to images I'm still working out. These are now going out to the West Coast. There are three places I'm going to show you right now. This is the Bonanza Motel, which is a simple drive-through 2-story inn. And I would call this the sort of average, easy in, easy out, affordable option. The next one, all three of these are in Berkeley. This is the Durant Motel, Hotel, sorry. And that would be the next upgrade, right? Like a little bit larger, a little bit more amenities, a restaurant on the ground floor, sort of the medium income sort of site. And then that'd be the Claremont, which you can't even really get close to. It's castle-like structure with racquetball club, tennis courts, majestic, awesome driveway to it. So those are sort of the three types of options. So what you'll find in all the cities is usually all the really rich ones are still around. They're still operational, and many of us would have already stayed in them, perhaps, if you do travel around the country. The medium ones can also still be there, and then the low-end ones, the quick in-and-out drive-throughs, those are of a different nature, if they're there or not. I'm going to take you for a moment to one of those houses. This is called Dunlops Restaurant, and it was started by Mrs. Dunlop. This is in Sacramento, California. And Mrs. Dunlop lived in Oak Park. She was the first black resident who lived in Oak Park, the first black resident to own her own house in this neighborhood. And she set up a restaurant in the front of her house and had some rooms as well, but she set up a restaurant. Pretty modest, right? And it's still there today. After she died, she wanted the home to be used for children that didn't have parents, that were orphan children. And that happened for a while, and then there wasn't enough money for it. And then the house sat empty for just shy of a decade. And then more recently, it's been purchased, and the owner of the property, because she commercialized the land, they now use the house as an Airbnb site. But the neighbors know who she was, and I learned all of this information literally from talking to the neighbors who live there. As I'm photographing, sometimes people come out and ask me, "What are you doing? Who are you? Are you with the government?" A photographer showing up is a thing in the world today. This is in Reno, Nevada. This is called the New China Club. Oh, wait, there's nothing there. The New China Club currently is a parking lot for a stadium. I'm still not sure if that little piece on the left is a piece of the New China Club. I'm still trying to figure that out. I did take a rock from it, so I can analyze it for later. But what I do get to find out is there's an archive that the owner of the New China Club left at Stanford University, ironically. He left one box of a handful of original photographs and news clippings of the place. So this is what it looked like on the outside, you know? It was an important place for, it was a gambling house. It was pretty opulent for Black life. That's my hand there reaching in, touching the original photograph. There are lots of photographs of beauty pageants, of people drinking the finest champagne, and they also had a golfing tournament. So there are lots of pictures of beautiful Black men and women golfing. Golfing this summer has been a theme in my travels with the Green Book. From the China Club or other sites that I visited that are no longer there, but the land has been turned into golf courses. So I've been finding that happening a lot, is that golf courses are a new theme. So if Black neighborhoods are literally wiped off the face of the earth, a good replacement seems to be a golf course. I'll let you think about that for a minute. All right, now we're going to go up to Seattle, Washington. This is the Benjamin Franklin, which has gone through lots of different renovations at this moment. It's empty. This was just shot this summer. This is the Doric New Washington. This is the Crater Lake Lodge in Oregon. What's interesting about places like the Crater Lake Lodge is you will have in the Green Book, Disneyland is located in there. Most of the national parks are also listed in the Green Book, and this would have been one of those type of lodges. This location is interesting for me. It's a little bit wider, but I focused on just the main part of where you would drive in with the sign. Is that what you find right now, or what I'm seeing right now, is these motels are no longer motels. I mean, yeah, if you're driving through, they have a few rooms where you could stay in overnight. You could probably also rent it out by the hour, many of these places for that commerce. But then there's also people living there full time, right? Because housing is an issue everywhere. And the owners of these motels are, there are families with 4 or 5 children living in hotel rooms full time as their residents. And I'm finding that again and again as I'm traveling to these sites, which is just another level, another layer to add into what I'm seeing in these buildings. This is the Monte Carlo Hotel. It's in Tacoma, Washington, and currently it is a law office for an injury lawyer. So, if you need cash now, 1-800-NEED-CASH-NOW, I had a break. This is the site you would go in Tacoma, the lawyer you would contact, which is also a nice, interesting layer to see on this journey. The Capitol Hill Motel. And then this is another location, the Crater Cottages in Klamath. This would be one of those where they've turned from a cottage motel into apartments and full-time living. In this case, definitely an upgrade with the solar panels. So while I'm on the road, while I'm driving, while I'm photographing actual sites on the Green Book, I make other types of work, which is thinking about what is it like? What is this process? What is so different about me as a black man driving across the United States, or just driving in general, right? This has been a theme that I've been aware of since the beating of Rodney King in 1991. Now, I could have thought about this before, but that, to me, was a seminal moment. And we've all experienced that moment on television. So I make additional works of art ruminating on, what am I looking at? What is this process of driving around the country? Why is this driving from safe place to safe place necessary? As I travel the country and speak to audiences, what I'm amazed with is how many people keep telling me we need a green book today, right? I must mention that the NAACP issued its first warning for black motorists in the state of Missouri in 2017. Right? So what I'm seeing is one of the baselines of what we are still dealing with on our American highways and road systems today. And then if I'm thinking about myself in a car, I have to also then think about myself outside of that car. And what is that interaction that I could have with a police officer? What would that be like, right? We have to remember that when you're a young child getting a driver's license, if you're black or brown, after you get that driver's license, or probably in that process of getting a permit, you're gonna get the talk. And the talk is, there are different rules for you that apply than for your white counterpart. What to do when you get pulled over by the police, right? And one of the things I was told to do is to move very slowly, to speak very clearly and short, and take directions, right? So if my wallet and my information is in the glove box, I will say, "Officer, I am moving my hand to the glove box to retrieve my documents," right? "Officer, I am moving my hand here." That's what I was told to do at 15. And every time I've been pulled over, which I haven't been pulled over on this journey at this moment, but I've been pulled over in the past, and I've followed those directions, and I've complied, and that allows me to be here today to do this work. So in this photograph, I'm thinking about what is it like to turn that camera, right, that is on me in the police officer's camera or in a passenger's cell phone. What if the camera lens or the camera is in my mouth? What if I am the recorder, right, of that encounter? The trauma that is part of, being pulled out of your car for your cell phone being mistaken for a gun is something that obviously the families have to deal with of these killed brothers and sisters, but also we as a society and as a community are having to deal with that. And we're also looking at those things on our devices. These next two photographs were taken specifically at Fisk University, a historically black college in Nashville. And throughout this college, when it was built, the college was built out of fire brick. And the reason it was built out of fire brick because from time to time, the locals would come and try to burn the college because they should not educate Negro men and women. So throughout the campus, there are these trapdoors that are where the teachers and the students and the cooks and everybody could drop into and move to another building, right, for safety. And these are all over campus. This is just one of them in the church. The church seems to be generally a safe place. It's definitely a safe place. This picture here is a small theater, really small theater, and I'm represented 3 times as I move through the image. because on each wing, which is not presented here, off the stage is not just props, but it's also additional trapdoors that you can drop down into to escape. Because if there's a large gathering of people, sometimes that's a good moment for people to make, to kill a lot of other people. I return briefly to the image of the beating of Rodney King, shot by George Holliday, March 3rd, 1991. So I'm just showing you some of the things that, got me to this project and keep me in this project, and questions that I had in 1991 that I really couldn't answer fully until 2016 when I went on this first journey, right? The things that we all keep in us, that we don't know quite how to deal with it, right? How to process all of that breakdown of policing, that breakdown of politicians failing us, that breakdown of community. This is another image that was influential to me, the murder of Sean Bell in New York and Queens, who was shot 50 times by police coming out of a club. And then, the constant memorials, in this case to a black man, after that event, and the uprising of a community, and the papers, and will the police officers, be convicted or not? They're usually not. And then the cycle continues, right? And now, more recently, the videotaping, right? The cell phone videotaping of the actual moments, the live streaming. This is from the dash cam, the police dash cam footage of the murder of Philando Castile in Minnesota. So from those kinds of works, I'm going to end on these images. This body of work consists of 45 images. The images are called Travel is Fatal to Prejudice, and I've made thus far 45 of them. And they represent men and women, black men and women, who were killed by police officers, killed by neighbors, for driving their cars, going to the store for food, being mistaken in a parking lot, sleeping, but then the police are called, and then that escalates into a murder as you're waiting to pick up your kid, but you're taking a little nap in your car. So I've made this series of work because it's been in my mind since 1991, at the very earliest, at the very least. But then also, I had an opportunity to see that soil project in 2016, right? Of that collection of a community that opened up the possibility to finally get at making a memorial to the things that I've been holding inside of me, I've been harboring. We all have been doing that. So what we have here is the name of the person. We have that location of their murder to the best of my ability, using news accounts and videos and screenshots, street views, to find that right lineup of police photos with Google Maps to find that location. So we have Rodney King, who was not killed, but I use him. He's the only one that did not die from that beating or first encounter. This is for Sean Bell. This is for Kendra James, who in 2003 was killed in Portland. She was pulled over for rolling through a stop sign. Philando Castile, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner. Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice. And these are shown in grids of 9, and they expand out. There's a guide of pictures on the left of a picture of each of the individuals, humans, citizens, right? And then I'll end on this one image. When I installed this sort of collection, this first collection of works that I was doing, I was driving the work to the gallery, and I purchased a pickup truck. I have a Ford F1, not Ford, God, I have a Dodge Ram 1500, that's a big deal. Ford and Dodge, right, different brands. And as I pulled into the gallery, the back space, I pulled back a little too far, and the guardrail actually hit my taillight and broke it, right? And immediately that fear came into me. Everyone wanted to unload my stuff, but I was like freaking out that I don't have a broken taillight, right? Because that is the quintessential thing that gets you pulled over by the police, right? And I love that it happened in a way while installing or bringing the work into an institution to exhibit it. It's kind of appropriate. So I include that whenever that's in a show. I include that taillight because that is usually the beginning of a story that hopefully doesn't end in death, but most often does. And I guess one other thought I want to leave us with is everywhere around the United States there were towns called sundown towns. Right? And they're all over the country and no place is spared. And what a sundown town is, would have been, if you're a person who's black or brown, you should not be in that town when the sun goes down, right? You need to be hiding, you need to be somewhere else, you need to basically be out of that town, right? And one of the places of refuge, I mentioned these trapdoors before, these different places, hotels and stuff that you could travel to in the Green Book. But the shelter of last resort, if you were on the road, didn't know where to go, would have been a funeral home. And what they would do is they would bury you. They would put you in a coffin and close the top. So if that, that's the last place you could go if there was nowhere else to stay. And the car option was not an option to stay. Or if you were being tailed or followed, there was still some dignity about maybe the church and still some dignity about funeral homes, places of worship and places of death that people let be, right? White communities let be. So as you go home tonight, drive safely. And thank you very much for letting me spend some time with you today.
The Underground Railroad in safe places.
Not for me. I mean, it is connected. I like to think of it as layers, right? So I am not photographing the Underground Railroad. There actually, I believe, is another photographer who's looking at those kinds of spaces. But what I find when I say layers is, what I find is when I'm on the road and traveling secondary and tertiary roads, I feel like I'm back in 1940. I feel like I'm back in that time period. I also can see, like thinking about Brian Stevenson's place on Commerce Avenue where the slaves were brought and sold. I'm seeing that pathway, that first level of slavery in the United States, right? Montgomery goes from 40,000 residents to 440,000 residents because 400,000 of them were slaves, right? So there's that layer, right? There is that Underground Railroad layer of a escape. There is the black migration layer that I get to see on that road, which is a later part of that. There is the civil rights movement that you can also see in that layer, and then other layers to the sort of idea that we're grappling with today of the driving while black, right? And but also just seeing the transitions of white flight out of urban areas to the suburbs, and now from the suburbs back into the urban area, right? That constant movement of displacement. What I see is, I'm in a town like Seattle, and people tell me, oh my God, you need to go photograph this little downtown corner that's about to be torn down. It is the center of the black community that will be gone in a couple of months. Now that's not a Green Book site for me, but I will photograph it while I'm there because they're asking me to, and I'm interested. What happens to that, I'm not sure later. But it's a layer. Yes?
I know your medium is photography, but can you talk about, what do you do with the dialogue, and how do you collect and put that forward with what you're doing from a photography perspective as it pertains to this project?
Okay. So there's a lot of stuff that it's hard to know where it all fits. So there's a radio program, if you Google my name and BBC, you can listen to that radio program. I suggest you. It's a beautiful program they did. So there's some of the audio which is there. I think as exhibitions occur down the road, there could be listening stations for that information. If there's anybody in the audience that does that kind of work and wants to talk to me, I'm happy to collaborate and open up other parts that I just can't do. I am a photographer and happy to be, and that is such a hard job unto itself. But I'm also collecting, I guess I'm thinking about it this way, as I'm looking at the archive of the Green Book, right? I am also developing one myself, which I'm also preserving. So there are lots of components to it. I don't have a full answer. I don't know where it all goes in the end, especially the audio stuff, but it's a document, and I think people want to talk because they feel that, what they know is going, and then they also know that they are going as well, so they want someone to remember. So as an artist, as a photographer, when I'm there, they want to share something with me so I can help remember and then pass that on. Yes?
Your talk is just reminding me, not that I necessarily need reminding of just how fraught the movement through space of black and brown bodies has always been. And the systems that have been needed to be put in place in order for black and brown bodies to successfully negotiate spaces with others, not without a second thought. So it's just bringing all of that back up. But I just wanted to return specifically to the Green Book, and I always wondered what were the means of distribution of the Green Book. How did people, was it subscription, was it known local outlets, locations? If one was traveling at that moment, how did one get a copy of the Green Book?
Okay, great question. Also, this is Dawood Bey, Chicago, amazing photographer. Yes, all right, thank you. And so the distribution of that is you could write in. If you found one or you heard of one, you could write in and then you would be put on the list and then they would send them to you. There was a lot of word of mouth distribution that was just people knew, either you knew or you didn't know. And there were some of them that were sold at gas stations. I think what later becomes Exxon was in mobile gas stations were a supporter, realizing that there was a lot of new money in black neighborhoods, African American neighborhoods, and the power to own a car, right? So they would have some of those on hand for distribution. So those would have been the ways that people receive that. You know, when I say like gas, it's like, like stories start to come to mind, and one that I must share, which, because it's like, just think about this today, is, yeah, your question makes an image come to my mind, is if you were a black person in the South and you had a new Cadillac and you had money for a new Cadillac, right, you had to have ways to be in that Cadillac without being harassed. So there are a couple ways you would do that. If you had a member of your family that was more light-skinned, you would put them in the back, because then you would look like a driver to that relative. You would always have on your side like a little cap to make you look like a chauffeur. That would get you out of the way. But then one of my favorite driving things is if you had that Cadillac and you were driving in the South, and there was a white person in front of you who was driving like 10 miles an hour and the speed limit was 25 or the speed limit was 55 or whatever, you couldn't pass them. It was against the rules, against the law to pass a white person in your car as a black person. So just think about that for a moment. Yes?
What Chicago images have you taken?
The question is, what Chicago images have I taken? I have not gotten to Chicago yet. Chicago is happening later this summer. So it's interesting. I've had many trips now in different parts of the country, but as a motorist, not all parts of the country are open at the same time. There's like fire season in California, there's hurricane season, there's tornado season, there's like monsoon season in certain places, there's just cold, awful snow. And Chicago's in that region right now that just doesn't feel accessible, because yeah, so it's a little cold. So Chicago's coming soon.
All right, we have time for just one more question.
This lady in the back here.
Okay, yes, you had your hand up for a long time.
I know you said that.
Here's a mic right there.
I know
Yes,
you. Oops.
so people can hear.
I know you said that there's been talk about republishing the Green Book. Is there sort of an underground through social media or someplace that people who are concerned can still go to find those safe locations?
Social media, do you have an answer to that?
I know that there are facsimiles being dated.
Yes, right. So I think there's a couple of questions there. So thank you for letting me cough. There are like versions of the Green Book that are produced today, facsimiles of the originals, but those are just copies of old ones that you can still buy them online and stuff like that. The original ones, you know, are going for tons of money. I think the last one sold for a couple $100,000. But they were not made for like long-term, like archival purposes. They were glove box, you know, pull-throughs. You know, they were small. The question though that you ask is there a system today for knowing where? I haven't found one. I don't know of one. That is happening today. I mean, when I say that people think there should be a Green Book today, I say that just based on, well, what we're reading in our newspapers, right? What we're seeing on our Facebook feeds and all that sort of stuff about what's happening in different parts of the country. Has anybody gotten together to do that? I would say nothing that I know of that's been organized. And then I guess my next question would be, what would that look like? You know, I mean, for me, I think of like, just like the anxiety of thinking about Airbnb specifically, and knowing that like there is a problem with Airbnb and that some people will not, you know, rent their homes out to people of color, right? So I mean, I think I would like to see something. I don't know what that would look like. I think what I can share to sort of always bridge us back together is that a lot of people don't feel safe driving on the road, you know? I get women that come to me and be like, yeah, I don't get out of my car when I'm in a gas station, you know? I let, you know, somebody else go, I let a guy go in, or I let my husband go in, you know, because I don't feel safe. So I would say if you just think about yourself traveling different parts of the country and think about when do you feel safe and then not safe, and then what is that? What is that about, you know? So I think I'll leave it there if that's okay. Okay?